Hello, everyone, and welcome to another DataFlint webinar. Super happy to be here. I'm here with Shachar Meir. And this time also, the time of the webinar is more comfortable to more people around the world, specifically you guys from India. I got a lot of requests. Prior webinars were too late. So Shachar is in London, so we can make it in time that is more suitable for you guys. And the topic today is like what's next for data engineering, which is a general claim. We will try to unpack it today. And a little bit about Shachar. So you've been doing data stuff the last 20 years throughout the stack, from startups to PayPal, doing big data when it was hot more than 10 years ago, when it was the big buzzword. Then like several years at Facebook, leading huge teams, specifically data engineering. And the last 2 years, you're a data advisor. So super excited, and I'm privileged that you accepted my invite. I should have
Thanks for having
also,
me.
my pleasure. And I would add an influencer. You crossed 50,000 followers on LinkedIn, right? So kudos on that.
Yeah, I've been posting on LinkedIn every day for the past 3 years, and I mean, 50K is just a number, but I think that what really means a lot to me is when sometimes I make a post or I talk about something and people reach out and say help them in their career, help them make a decision, help them with the data strategy. Like these are the things that matter. Yeah.
Oh, so curious. So you decided a few years ago posting every day, or it's just because you said, okay, I have ideas I want to share. Like, was it a strategy to do it every day?
Yeah, so I've always so just maybe I can quickly introduce myself. So I'm Shahar. I've been leading data teams for the past 20 plus years. I started my career as a DBA, transitioned to team lead position, been in smaller companies and bigger companies. I left Meta about 3 years ago because I realized that over the past 20 years, I've seen a lot of companies that had good data teams. They had decent data platforms. They had a lot of data and nothing was working. No one was happy. It was a complete disaster. So I ask myself, why is it that in 2023 we're still failing as an industry? And why do so many companies don't feel like they get the value that they should or they want from their data teams? And I decided to investigate that, and I realized two things. One is that I know how to fix it. I have the playbooks because my entire career I've been fixing data teams and helping companies get the value in different scenarios and different setups. So I think I have the playbooks. And the second thing I realized is if instead of going and being chief data officer one company at a time, I can achieve a lot more impact if I would go and work with multiple companies at an advisor capacity. So that's what I do. But going back to your question, when I left
Mhm.
Meta, was the first time in more than 20 years that I didn't have teams, I didn't have people to grow, I didn't have anyone. Which is something I'm very passionate about, and I thought that okay, I have a lot of valuable insights and learnings, and I see a lot of things, and I want to share them with somebody. I mean, being a solopreneur is a lonely job, and I decided that I'm going to use LinkedIn as my outlet, experiment with that, and see if this is a way to distribute value and help people learn things that I'm seeing and learning along the way, or get some of the things that the insights I've gained from my 20 years of experience. So I decided to post, and obviously the feedback from the community was positive, so I kept going, and that's kind of how I got into it.
Got it. Cool. So great answer. And you mentioned you started as a DBA. So when was the first time you heard about data engineering? Was it even called data engineering back in the day? And tell us a little bit about the beginning of your journey.
Yeah, so it's actually very interesting because when I started my journey, let's say in the beginning, in early 2000s, there was no such thing as data engineering. There was software engineering, and then there were data professions, which were DBA, database administrator, and we had physical DBA, logical DBA, data modelers. We had all sorts of different other professions, BI developers. So they were all about data, but it was completely separate from engineering, and there was a very clear separation between the people who build the platforms and build the tools to the people who manage the data. And then I think in around the time I was at PayPal, where big data was becoming sexy, and all of a sudden you had platforms like Hadoop and storage and compute got separated, and all of a sudden, processing the data was not very structured. You had to work harder to process that. And also the other thing that have happened is that in the beginning of my career, a lot of the software we were working with was monolithic platforms, and all of a sudden you have a lot of SaaS products. So if you think of a very small company, their data could be scattered across 20 or 30 different SaaS products, right? So their email communications is one product, Facebook ads, Google ads, their CRM system, their customer success system. So they have what they consider as their data is scattered across a lot of platforms.
Which year was it? 2010 approximately?
Um, I would say around, yeah, to 2013, 2015. So I think that's where we started feeling the change quite heavily, where it was becoming clear. And now all of these SaaS products, they would have an API and you could go and fetch the data. You could also feed them with data. But for that, you needed a different skill set, right? So it's no longer just SQL and data modeling and writing stored procedures and building dashboards. It's a different skill set. So you need to learn Python. You needed to be able to interact with APIs. Sometimes you needed to build your own APIs to expose the data to such platforms. So I think this is around the time where people realize that the distinction or the separation between data professions and engineering professions are kind of artificial, and they were coming together.
Got it. And I guess it aligned with how the cloud has spread, and then we have the separation between storage and compute. It's approximately the same time, right?
Yeah, so Hadoop was open source. So again, you use a lot of technologies that are far less mature. They need a lot more massaging and hand holding, and sometimes you need to build complementary tools to do your job, which is different than buying an Oracle suite or SQL Server suite, and then you get everything out of the box. So again, people needed to have the skills that they never had before, and even processing the data. If you start using Spark or Hive or Presto or different platforms we had at the time, then again, these things become more technical. It's not just writing pure SQL and getting the results that you want. And this is where data professionals became, again, the engineering aspect of data became more prominent and more profound.
So let's say back then at PayPal, which I presume even back then there was a lot of data. What was the name of, let's say, the group, the department? Would data engineering, or was it mentioned, or it was like big data? How was the naming back then?
So when I joined Meta, I think it was called data management, the organization that was responsible for managing the company's data. And when Hadoop started coming in and they started bringing in new technologies and all of that, they changed the group name to Data Technologies because they realized that it's not just about managing data, it's bigger than that. I'm not sure that Data Technologies is a great name, but
No, but I was asking about PayPal.
yeah,
Okay, okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, at PayPal.
But let's say back then you were hiring people to your team, right?
Oh,
So
you
which,
mean what was the profession of that?
yeah, exactly. Like which kind of people you were looking for? Was it like software engineers, or already back then there was like, okay, data engineering, or
At PayPal,
how?
we were not hiring data engineers. Towards the end, I think we started calling ourselves data engineers, but I was looking for people with either software engineering background or DBA background, maybe application DBA background and data modeling, but people that would also have Python and Java as skills. And it was difficult to find because what we were looking for didn't have a very clear name in the industry, but I knew exactly what it is when I saw that. So. Um,
So let's say you brought a DBA, then you had to like train him on the job if it was because big part of the job is software engineering, right?
Yeah. And that always happens when roles evolve, right? Even right now, you hire data engineers, but you need to train them on new things that, we can look at the time. It's been 10 minutes and we still haven't said the word AI, but um you know what I mean, right? Like even today, you hire people and you need to train them
What
on
is it? What are we talking about? I know LLMs.
LLMs. Yeah, exactly.
Got it. So I'm asking because I want to set the stage for like get into present day and then hopefully chat about what are your thoughts about the future. So if we stay even again back then around 10 years ago, uh, which part of those, let's call them for now data engineers, was actual software engineering slash writing code compared to other aspects that they were doing? And what do you think? What are your thoughts about how this progressed throughout the years? This kind of aspect of their job.
So if we still talk about PayPal, it was still mixed because I mean, there was Hadoop was coming, but we still most of our data, I would say 95% of our data was still in relational databases in Teradata. So in that sense, I mean, we started using Hadoop. Software engineers were mostly the ones building on top of it, but it wasn't the mainstream platform that we're using. I think that again, towards 2015, 2016, the idea or the concept of that data engineering is a thing became more recognized, and I think that Meta were also or Facebook were one of the first companies that actually gave it a name and said these people are data engineers. And in 2016, when I was interviewing for Meta, I was already interviewing for a data engineering position.
Got it. And to the topic, I'm asking that because just to give context, we would all agree that today this writing code became a commodity, right? So I'm trying to understand, okay, so back in the day, how much time was spent on that aspect, assuming that we have stakeholders that define the business problem that we're trying to solve. And this is already like, we know what we want to do. How much time does the technical aspects take? Let's say out of a typical day of a data engineer in Meta, circa 2018 or something like that.
Um, I would say that it still took quite a lot of time back then, but writing pipelines was still a little bit difficult. And also don't forget that Meta has another problem that most companies don't have, at least not in that way, which is the scale at which they operate is just astonishing. And we had tables that a daily partition would be more than 300, 500 terabytes for just one single daily partition, right? Tables that so again, we had exabytes of data. It's an insane scale, and because of that, sometimes even doing very simple things required actually doing a lot of data wrangling, and things were just not possible. Keeping raw data was not possible, in some cases for a very long time. Sometimes because of policies, but also sometimes just because it's just too much. Like we didn't have enough storage to do that, and so. I think that Meta was a very technically heavy data engineering role, I would say, compared to what I see across the rest of the industry. At least back then it was.
Got it. And because you saw a lot of different data engineering, you managed huge teams back at your time at Meta. What would you say that separates like a great, for our case, data engineer from somebody who's like average? Is this something specific you saw along the way and then you can like quickly see it? Or it's something that it takes time? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think the most important thing, let me tell you a story. And by the way, apologies if anyone saw on my YouTube my talk about data engineering. I think you've heard this story before. I've mentioned that a few times. But a few years ago, my daughter, she must have been about 4 years old, and she was running out of space in her room. She had a lot of toys, a lot of stuff, and her floor space was just getting crunched, and we wanted to make some space for her. So we bought a cabinet an IKEA cabinet that I just built over the weekend, and we wanted to clear some space for her so she has more room to play. And a few days before that, I'd interviewed the data engineer, and when I asked this person, what do you do? Tell me about yourself. They said, I use Spark, I use Scala, I use Python. They just gave me a laundry list of technologies, which is an answer I've heard before many times. A lot of people talk about the work in that way. But that weekend when I was building the cabinet, I was thinking about this data engineer, and I thought, why did they describe their role in that way? I mean, it's so bizarre. And I spent some time thinking about it, and I realized that basically saying I use Spark, I use Scala, I use Python is essentially like you, Daniel, asking me, Shahar, what did you do this weekend? And I say I use the hammer, I use nails, I use a screwdriver, which of course,
Use Zoom. I go on Zoom calls.
yeah, I got on Zoom calls. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter that like that's not the point, right? So a lot of data engineers and data professionals, the way they think about the work is through the tools that they use. And then the better ones, they would say, I build the pipeline, I build a data set, which is the equivalent of I'm building a cabinet. The best ones, when you talk to them, they will say, okay, our marketing funnel is not optimized, and because of that, we're spending too much money acquiring the wrong customers. So we spend a lot of money acquiring customers with low lifetime value. So I'm building a pipeline and a data set and a dashboard that will basically segment our customers and help us identify pockets where our marketing spend is not optimized, and then we can readjust that. The output is still the same. They still use SQL and Spark and Scala and Python, and they still build data sets and they still use dashboards, but they talk about the purpose. And I think that those are the best data engineers best professionals I've worked with in my entire career. They start with the purpose. And the interesting thing is that this is probably less than 10% of the professionals I've worked with in my career. Most of them, they don't think about the purpose. I was sitting as a team lead. I was sitting with people on my team and on my organization, and I asked them, okay, show me what you're working on. So they show me a dashboard they're building, and I say, why are we building this dashboard right now? And they say, oh, my PM asked me to build it, which is a strange answer. And I'm like, okay, so what are they going to do with it? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, can we find out what is the problem? Like, if you don't know what they're trying to do, then how do you know that building it is going to solve it? Like, maybe you're just wasting a lot of time and cycles and efforts on something that's never going to work and never going to achieve any impact. So, I think that the best professionals that I see, and we'll talk about it probably more when we start talking about the future of data engineering, because I think that this is going to be a key aspect. They don't describe the hammer and the nail, but they focus on the purpose. Like, I need to create space for my daughter to play, therefore I'm building a cabinet, and I do that using the hammer and the nails.
Loved it. And I would say from my own experience, I would reinforce your answer as something that I think as well. And to what you have said, there's a few positive aspects, right? So, first, in my opinion, like engineers is somebody that can solve problems. That's like the highest abstraction of what an engineer is. And then you need to choose the right tool for the problem at hand, right? So first you need to understand what the problem is and then choose the tool and not straight away talk about different tools. Second, there's the aspect of being close to, let's call it the product or the stakeholder or the business aspect. At the end, that's the value that we are trying to provide. And if we, as the technical people, don't understand what's the reasoning, then many things can get lost. So yeah, I would totally agree with you 100%. That's
And and your framing is 100% correct. And look, you said an engineer is somebody who solves problem. You didn't say engineer is somebody who does work. So how can you solve a problem if you don't even understand what is the problem that you try to solve, and you don't understand, what does the what does the outcome should look like? So if people talk to me about in an interview, I can see it in less than 5 minutes when I interview somebody, when they talk about, when they give me a laundry list of technologies, of course, that's inputs, right? That's the inputs to the work that they do. That's not interesting. If somebody talks to me about outputs, that's also not interesting. I build a dashboard, I build the data set. I'm like, okay, what's changed as a result of having this dashboard? But when somebody talks to me about outcomes, okay, and what has changed in the world as a result of them doing this work, then I know that they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. So I would say, do you think it's something that somebody who's a junior can already start practicing, or you would say it takes time? Because I would guess some would say, okay, just barely trying to understand what's on my left, what's on my right, just started my career. How would be able to get to that point? So what would you answer to this kind of a question?
I would say 100% yes, anyone can do it. If I met a data engineer right now who graduated university yesterday, they just started their first data engineering job, and they would have asked me, "Hey, Shahar, but how do I do what you just described?" I would say be curious and ask a lot of questions, right? So somebody says, "Oh, can you build this the dashboard for me?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, of course I can, but what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Let's talk about it, right?" And they would say, "Okay, I'm trying to optimize our marketing funnel," and ask some questions to understand that. And if you don't, the difference between a junior person and a senior person is that the people have more context, and they may have some more experience, so they can anticipate or understand some of the answers without asking questions. If you don't have that context or you don't have that experience, you can still achieve the same outcome by asking more questions, right? So you can say, okay, so how do you know that building this dashboard will help you solve that problem? Um, Let them talk to you and explain that. And if they can't, then there is clearly a problem here. Um, and I think that when you start asking those questions, and this is something I did from like very early on in my career, intuitively, not because somebody told me that I should be doing that, but because I thought that I need to understand what I'm working on. And when I started doing those things, I realized that in a lot of cases, when I ask people, okay, what are we trying to do here? They themselves didn't know. And I'm not doing that to trip them over or to say, hey, like you have no idea what you're doing. Don't talk to me ever again. I'm there to help them. And by the way, one of the best things that you can do with your stakeholders when you work with them is help them create clarity on what is needed, what are we doing, why are we doing this, how do we know it's going to work, um, and is this the right approach or not, and all of that is done through dialogue. So I would say if you're a person who just picks up tickets in Jira and then executes on them, that's not a good position to be in because you're not going to grow, you're not going to learn. If you're a person that talks to their stakeholders, talk to the business, asking a lot of questions, curious, gaining the context, then you're going to win this game.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and I would add that if you are taking tickets from Jira and executing them, then I have an LLM that can do it, you know? So that's exactly, in a sense, the demarcation, right? Where we, as people, as engineers, fit today and also in the future, right? Assuming code is a commodity, right? So it's even makes your claim stronger. How important this understanding of why are we doing this? What's the business problem that we're trying to solve? Um, cool. So fast forward and the last few years that you are been doing your work as a data advisor. Just out of curiosity, you work mostly with smaller companies, also like bigger enterprises. So just to understand which type of people you interact on your day-to-day basis.
So all sorts of, but my best clients are probably, um, sorry, data leaders in medium-sized to large companies. So I would say probably 2,000, 3,000 people is a good sweet spot for me. This is where I can create the best impact because they do have a data organization, usually just one and not multiple, like you have in companies like Meta, where it's highly distributed and every business unit will have their own. So in this case, you
Pun
can.
intended. You said highly distributed.
It is highly distributed. Yeah, unintended. Well done.
Can
But
do jokes that are not related to the distributed computing. Yeah, sorry, continue.
Well done, but good, well spotted. But I think that in these kind of companies, there's still one data organization. It's still quite defined what is the data org, but at the same time, they have a lot of inefficiencies. They have a lot of issues. Some of that comes from technology, some of that comes from people, from process, from culture. So I basically come in, and there's two ways I work with them. Sometimes I just do executive coaching, and I work with the chief data officer or the VP data, and behind the scenes, nobody even knows that I'm there, and I help them succeed in their role, and I help them make critical decisions, and I help them make sense of the situation in front of them. And I'm sounding board, advisory board. And in some cases, I'm in the front, I do a gap analysis, I understand what is happening right now, what is the current situation, what is the desired situations, what are the gaps between them, and then I put together a plan for how to get from where you are to where you want to be, and we work on this together to roll it out.
Got it. So now that you said that, I can say with certain the last few years we all experienced the, let's call it LLM, AI, whatever. I don't know if I would say a revolution, but at least evolution, right? So we're now in a place which is different than a few years ago, and you've seen it at various companies in the last 2 years. So I guess you have an interesting point of view on that. So first, I would ask, um, do you see a change in companies on how they leverage all the tools, be it on the technical level, like the actual engineers, could be even data scientists, data analysts, up to the management level and how they leverage that? Did you see actual changes, or it's more like just code we can do, but other stuff it's still not there? So I would like to hear your thoughts.
Um, I think there's a spectrum that goes between companies that are not even thinking about AI and LLMs yet, and they're not even aware of that, or like banks and big institutions, highly regulated. They know it's a thing, they know it exists. It doesn't change anything in the way they work. To the other extreme, which is companies like Meta, for example, right now, where and companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and all the AI labs, where they push people very hard to start adopting it, in a very intense way. Everybody's managing a bunch of AI agents that do work for them and do all the communication for them, and basically replace them. And everybody's becoming an orchestrator, just managing a bunch of agents doing work. So I would say these are the two extreme. I think that a lot of companies are that I see are they're somewhere in the middle, but not in the middle. They're probably closer to the beginning, where there's a lot of FOMO. There's a lot of fear of missing out. They are thinking that everybody else is way ahead of them, but everybody is at the same level and at the same stage. They're thinking that there's something here, something big that's happening that they need to respond to. And because of that, a lot of companies, they look for projects that they can do with AI, and they look for use cases rather than, so it's kind of like, you're walking around with a hammer looking for nails, right? That's what is happening. They keep asking themselves what needs to change in how they work, but the truth is that in this kind of situation, sometimes it creates the wrong incentives, because they feel like they have to do something. So they roll out a customer success chatbot that is not even very helpful, and they think, that's a huge success. So everybody is now rolling chatbots and doing these kind of things, and not sure that they're getting the value. On engineering productivity, they get a lot of value. That is clearly one of the areas where AI is far exceeding, expectations, and a lot of engineers happily delegate a lot of the coding to Claude, and they use AI heavily to, as part integrated in their workflows and their building process. So that's very clear. In other places like marketing, like sales, they're starting to use that sometimes to qualify leads, or to come up with creative ideas, and for ideation and that sort of stuff. So again, as a productivity tools, very successful. Beyond that, a lot of companies are still trying to figure out what does it mean for them. That's the honest answer of what I see right now.
Okay. Uh, I was a little bit surprised because I have friends that work at large financial institutions, and I chat with one of them recently, meaning like less than a month ago, and he said again one of the largest financial institutions. It said like this year they said it's like the AI agent focus, and all departments are trying to incorporate. And I was surprised because I would presume that a financial institution would be much more conservative, right? I think they have Claude and like at least as far as I can tell, all the things I'm using. So I'm a little bit surprised about what you're saying. But again, you have seen a wider spectrum probably than I did.
So I think everybody's thinking about that. Every company out there is saying this is AI, year, and also in terms of budgets, they're shifting a lot of budget into AI modernization projects and things like that without fully understanding what does this mean for them. They just do it. When it comes to highly regulated financial institutions, so for coding, maybe, they might use that and for some other use cases, but I think that highly regulated environments are very slow to change in general. Like, see how long it has taken some of these institutions to move to fully move to the cloud, right? And many of them still run a lot of their operations on-prem
Oh,
and things like that. And you speak to a lot of banks that still run on mainframe and SQL Server and DB2, and a lot of their production systems are 20, 30 years old, even more than that. And that's the reality they live in. So I think that smaller companies, newer companies have less legacy and therefore can afford to be more nimble and move faster, whereas the big financial institutions, I think that these transitions are inherently more difficult for them just because of the sheer amount of legacy they have.
cool. I remember that I forgot to tell our listeners, feel free to ask questions in the chat. The last 10 minutes will be a Q&A, and I'll read them to Shahar, and he's going to answer them. So again, if you have any questions and that you thought throughout, feel free to write them down. Okay, so we are in today's day and age. So before we're going to chat about the future, my question to you is, let's say data engineers today, be it even seniors or juniors, uh, what are your thoughts about the market? Meaning, maybe you have also data. Like, is the market for data engineering stays the same, grows, or shrinks? Because I've seen conflicting insights. So first, what are your thoughts? And if somebody is now trying to look for something, how would you tackle this kind of challenge of finding a new job and in this day and age?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have specific data, but I talk to a lot of recruiters and recruiting companies and recruiting agencies. They have very good read on the market. And by the way, recruiting agencies are very good leading indicator in general, because when they have less job, you know that we're heading into a recession. And when they start getting busy, you know that the economy is thriving again and all of that. Some of the good news is that some friends who work in a data specific recruiting agency, he's running an agency, and he said we're busier than we've ever been in the last 3 or 4 years. So something is changing in the market, and it's waking up again a little bit.
It's
Um,
in the UK, just to
in the
understand.
UK.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the same time, the market is brutal. We have to be honest about that, right? Because what is happening is that, and actually, I want to take a step back,
Go
uh,
ahead.
explain what is happening, and what's been happening. Do you want me to share slides? Can I?
Yeah, if you have slides, for sure.
I have just a few slides, and this is from a recent talk I've given let me just bring it up in Data Day, Texas, in January this year. And I think it will help people understand what is happening in our industry right now in general when it comes to headcount, because um, just give me 1 second.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no worries. I would just say that just like the last few weeks, I heard or saw some data that showing also increasing demand for data engineering. But I guess if you are a junior, it's much harder than before. I guess big part of the demand is for more senior position. Again, that's the way I think about it. But oh,
Yeah, so I talked, this is from a talk I've given on Data Day Texas. The full talk is on my YouTube channel, by the way. You can go and watch it. It's called the 1 Million Data Professional. You can see my slides, right?
yep,
So I think that there's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now. And if you want to understand why there is uncertainty, you have to go back in time to the point that it kind of changed. And I think that up until, let's say, 2018, I would say that things were sort of normal as far as I'm concerned. But then towards the end of 2019, COVID hit, and the largest pandemic of our lifetime. I thought it's going to be the end of, humanity and the end of tech, but all of a sudden there was a massive growth in tech, and companies started hiring like crazy. I mean, the number of open jobs we had in data engineering in Meta in London in 2020 and 2021 was the highest I've ever seen. We were interviewing, spending half of our time just interviewing and growing our teams. So there was a massive growth in tech. Then our executives were telling us that remote work is the future, and by 2030, half of the workforce will be working remotely. And it all seemed like it's kind of stable, and it was kind of like a bubble where we were all safe in it. But then in 2023, some things changed, or mid 22, I would say, and all of a sudden companies started laying off and talking about efficiency. So something has changed in the way companies talk and what they do. End of 22,
yeah,
ChatGPT.
November 22.
November 22, ChatGPT was launched, and then Claude. So everybody sort of associated layoffs and all of that with AI coming out, and thought, okay, we have these things that are going to replace our job. And then companies were becoming more aggressive with their efficiency talks and narrative that they were pushing. And then since then, we've been in a continuous cycle of basically layoffs, cost cutting, return to office, and this AI arms race that we're seeing, that everybody is exchanging humans for GPUs and trying to hoard as much capacity as possible. And it's crazy, right? Like the last few years have been very intense and crazy, and it feels like something is broken. But actually, if you take the exact same graph and you overlay the federal interest rate, like the interest rates of the federal banks, you can see that as soon as COVID hit, the federal bank in the US dropped interest rates to zero, which was the last time they did it was in 2008 during the housing crisis, the subprime crisis.
Yeah, that's 2008 or something, right?
Eight, yeah, 2008, nine, during the subprime
Right.
crisis, and that's the interest rate. Again, I'm not an economist. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but the interest rate is basically a very crude tool that they have to incentivize the market and to shift the market. And when they want people to spend more money and to kind of uh, stimulate the market, they lower it so that borrowing money is cheap. And so a lot of people take money and invest it. And when they want people to be more conservative, they do it. And actually, if you look at this, the interest rate, and you look at the chart that I was just showing you, it aligns perfectly, right? COVID outbreak, interest rate goes down, everybody's hiring like crazy, interest rates starting to go up as soon as people realize that somebody needs to pay for all of these COVID things. And all of a sudden companies are laying off and talking about efficiency. Companies were just doing what they were told to do, right? In 2020, companies were told, okay, money is cheap, just take it and do whatever you want with it. So that's what they did. And in 2022, they were told, okay, now it's getting expensive again. And they're
Yeah.
like, oh, we don't need all these employees. And people immediately made this association of AI is replacing us. And executives, you also use that as an excuse because, okay, great. Now I don't have to explain why I'm doing this. I don't have to explain that I
Yeah.
overhired in 2020 and now I need to compensate for that.
They have a scapegoat, so they use the AI as the
Yeah,
scapegoat.
that's an excuse. But so this is what's been happening at a nutshell, right?
As a
But
data scientist, I must say correlation is not causation, right? So The listeners take it with a grain of salt.
So it goes in all ways, right? But the point is that the market is still brutal right now because every time a company like Meta lays off 10,000 employees and Google lays off 15,000 employees and then Amazon lays off another 20,000 employees, these are another 10, 15, 20,000 people looking for a job, right? So there's more supply in the market, there's less demand. And because there is less demand, companies can afford to hire more senior, more experienced people and pay them less money than they would have otherwise. And also, in general, a lot of companies are trying to downsize, not necessarily because of AI. Like, I'm not sure I'm fully buying this argument because, if you can do with the same number of people twice than what you could do before, then why is the answer let's let go 50% of them rather than let's do twice, right? Like what's
Exactly twice and then do 4x on the amount of the
exactly. So this argument doesn't check out for me, and I think that the truth is that companies basically overspent and they're responding to a very tough macroeconomic environment, and where people are being more conservative with their money, and the wars in Ukraine and in the Middle East, and there's a oil crisis, and there's a lot of things going on right now in the world that make the macroeconomics not as appealing as it was a few years ago. Companies respond to that and they say, "Oh, that's because of AI," because it's easier to than to explain that they didn't manage their finances responsibly. Um, but that's the truth. But again, for early career people, for junior people, I think it makes the idea of like the finding a job more difficult because the market is very saturated with experienced senior people who look for a job that you can pay them less than you would have otherwise, then they can hit the ground running. So companies just don't hire enough early career people. So that's the truth. Now, what do you do with that? So I would say, sorry, number one is um, get a job. So even if the job is not data engineering, but you want to be a data engineer, if you can be an analyst, go be an analyst. And then when you already work for the company, try to find a way to move to the data engineering team, try to take some tasks from them to gain the experience and that sort of stuff. If you cannot get an analytics role, go work in customer support and then start building reports for them or in operations. I've seen people make these internal transitions, and I would say that moving internally is sometimes easier than coming in externally because you already work for the company, you have context, you've proven yourself, you built relationships. It's a lot easier to move between jobs when you're all internal candidate. So I would say that's one thing that people should do. The other thing is that the signal to noise ratio is very high right now with features like apply immediately on LinkedIn and all of that stuff. People put out the job advert and, 1 hour later, then they have 1,000 candidates, 2,000 candidates. There's not a chance in the world that they're actually going to review all of them. And I think that the people who are going to win this game are not the ones that will, apply more or will game the system and try to build CVs that match to the specific role they're applying, but it will be the people who go in person. So go to meetups, speak with hiring managers, speak with people who already work in these companies. Go on LinkedIn, comment on the hiring managers' posts. Like, people love engagement. They will recognize your name after you do it for 5 or 6 times. Reach out to them, say, "Hey, I've seen your post. I would love to chat." Talk to them, find ways to engage with people in person, in real life. And that's the way to stand out in all this noisy environment. By the way, I have another video on my YouTube on how to target any company, and I explain exactly how to do that step by step. Um, yeah, find people who work there, engage with them, make friendships, use your network, and that's going to be your secret weapon, not anything else.
build relationships at the end.
100%. And in a world that's becoming more isolated, more individualistic, more online, more faceless. I mean, having a face, having a name, being out there, being a real person. I think these things are going to make a big difference.
Yeah. So again, 100% agree. And if people ask me, and I get asked often similar questions, my answer is quite similar. And also, it dovetails to what we chatted prior about understanding like the higher context, right? So, what's the problem, what we're trying to achieve, and also here, like build relationships. So those two aspects, or let's call it concepts, are applicable in general in life. So it's not just about data engineering, right? It's general concepts that work in every other field, uh, which probably means that there's some merit to it. Cool. So the last, before we go to the Q&A, I would like to chat about the future and what do you think? So as far as I can tell, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying, okay, AI has value for sure, but the challenges, let's call in the industry today, are not related to AI. Um, so first, would you agree with that claim? And second,
Um,
do tell me your thoughts about the future, where we're heading.
no, so there are a lot of challenges in our industry right now. Some of them are related to AI, some of them are not related to AI. I think that what we're seeing with efficiency and layoffs and all of that is companies responding to macroeconomics plus arms race of trying to let go of employees to get to free up some money to buy GPUs and to be the first one achieving, AI capabilities that everybody wants to get. So we're seeing that. But if we talk about the future, yeah, we need more than 5 minutes for that. But I think my personal view is this, right?
We
First,
can do 10. Granted, let's go.
we can do 10. My personal view is this. First of all, I think that changes are hard. Okay. And we can see it all throughout history. There have been periods of big changes. Some changes were bigger than others that required people to do things differently, right? To give an example, in the 1960s in the US, there was the automation crisis when computers came out and they started doing a lot of things that people would do manually before. It's called the automation crisis. You can go and read about it. People were literally writing letters to the president of the United States saying automation is going to take our jobs. And I think that if you take these letters and you just replace the word automation with AI, you will see that you will almost feel like a deja vu, right?
To
Um,
agree,
to
it
give
did change, or replace some jobs, but it made other ones, new ones, right?
Yeah,
So
so let's look at specific examples, right? So in 1960, for example, American Airlines had a contact center of about 600 people that were responsible for ticket booking, and these 600 people they would book tickets. The average booking time over the phone, the average booking time was 1.5 hours. Okay, 1.5 hours to book one flight ticket, and the error rate was 8%. So one of 10 people boarding a plane, there's something wrong with their seat. They're not on this plane, they're not in this seat, somebody else is sitting there, something is wrong, right? And then I think IBM came up and said, oh, we have this computer thing, we can automate this process for you. These employees were anxious because they said, okay, we're all going to lose our jobs. And of course they did. But what people say, during change is what is being lost, not what is being gained. And if you think about how aviation works today, I booked a flight ticket a couple of weeks ago. I had to go to a conference. It took me 2 minutes. I did it on my phone on my way somewhere. I was sitting on the tube just booking a flight ticket. No error rate, no nothing. I got it immediately on my phone. When I got to the gate, I just scanned my phone and just went on got on the plane. That would have never worked. Like aviation industry could have never gotten to the size that it did if it took us 1.5 hours to book a ticket over the phone. It just couldn't, right? To give another example, I was watching this video about animators in Disney in 1950, 1960, whatever, where you could see these animators sitting and tracing characters and page by page by frame,
yeah,
doing this kind of work. Obviously, nobody does animation like that today. Everybody's using computers. Does that mean that there's no animation movies anymore? No, the animation movies is booming, right? It's exploding. There's more animation today than ever before, and it keeps growing. It just grows differently. Okay, Um, the other thing that I think that people don't realize is in Data Day Texas, we had a discussion about where the world is going with AI. We had a room of about, I think, 400 people, and I stood up and I said, is there anyone in this room? Raise your hand. Is there anyone in this room right now who doesn't have a smartphone in their pocket? At least one right now. Nobody raised their hand, right? And I said, right now you all have cameras that are probably far superior to what professional photographers had 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, the best ones, right? You have amazing cameras in your pocket right now, and you take hundreds of pictures every month. Does that make you a photographer? No. If you would run a big event like a wedding or a conference or something, would you still get professional photographers? Absolutely, yes. Why? Everybody has a camera, but it's not the same. So I think that what people also don't realize is that the fact that you enable something at mass doesn't take away from experts and expertise, and experts still have a place. It's not going to be that experts are the only ones doing this thing. Everybody can take photos, and today more photos are taken in the world than every day than ever before. But you know, professional photography still has a lot of place.
I
So
love it. Great, great example.
yeah,
I
so
agree.
so where are we going with this, right? So just
Specifically, data engineers. Let's focus. Like, what do you think about that?
specifically on tech and data engineering. So I
Yeah.
think that in general, what is happening is that we're moving, and this is a gradual process that's been happening over the past 70 years, that we're moving from telling computers how to do things to telling computers what to do, right? And this has always been the dream, right? Like to be able to tell the computer what you want and they would do it, right? So in the 1950s, if you wanted to tell a computer what to do, you had to write assembly code. You needed to know the specific CPU you're working with and specific architecture and moving bits from one register to another. And then came up higher order languages like C, for example, that would translate to the specific assembly code of the CPU. So that part was abstracted from you. And then came object-oriented languages like C++ and Java that sort of resembled the way we humans think about the world, where there are objects and you can interact with them. And that was another step forward in moving away from how to do to what you want to do. And then came languages like Python, where in a one-line code with lots of libraries and lots of things, you can basically write a fully functioning app. You still tell it how to do things. You're very prescriptive. And now finally, we're getting to a point that you tell the computer what you want and it generates code for you, right? I think that what it means, and you kept saying a lot of times throughout this podcast, that coding is becoming commodity. I think that in a way, if computer understood, 70 years ago what we wanted from them, we never needed coding in first place, right? So coding, you can think of it as a workaround to a computer that doesn't understand, and you have to tell it. Now everybody can tell computers what to do, and in a way, it means that you don't, you have more people who can do that, but it also increases the noise level because everybody can build things and everybody can build the wrong things. Anyone can ask questions, but more people, like never in our history was it so easy to ask the wrong questions and get the wrong answers at such a scale. And I think that the people who will thrive in this kind of environment are not the people who know how to build. Like that doesn't matter anymore. Anyone can build whatever you think you're going to build, and anyone else can build it and replicate that. And you don't have any added value here. But things like clarity in thinking, things like good framing, ability to prioritize, ability to ask questions, problem solving, right? The distinction of problem solving versus doing work. These are the skills and these are the things that become more critical than ever in this new environment. I think
I
that
love it.
data
I won't push
engineers,
back.
data engineers specifically will move from building pipelines and writing code and doing a lot of manual work like that and debugging and understanding and mapping source data to target data, and those kind of things will become easier. But managing data making sure that you still have a source of truth. Data governance is becoming more important than ever and more sexy than ever. If anyone can build data sets, how do you make sure that there's only one source of truth for the company's revenue or for daily active users? How do you make sure that people don't just build things recklessly and break things, day in, day out? And how can you gain trust in your metrics? So it will move from manually doing the work to managing the work and managing the data, which I think an analogy that I have in mind is pilots who used to fly airplanes manually, and then came autopilots. You still have pilots sitting in the cockpit, but what they do is they manage the flight, right? They think ahead, they look at the flight, they do risk mitigation, they make decisions. They don't necessarily have to do the nitty-gritty of flying the airplane all the time.
Perfect. So that's a great point. And now we will have 5 minutes. So there are exactly like 5 questions. So I think we're going to cover everything. So first, I'll start with Sayali. Joshi asked if it's going to be recorded. Yes, it's going to be on YouTube. We're going to share it with everyone after the fact. Okay, Akopian Christina, I'm not sure if it's he or she, asking, so the question is for like a middle data engineer, what's important to learn in today's market? Because there's a lot of buzzwords, Spark, Snowflake, dbt, AWS, whatever. How you think about that?
I would say learn whatever your employer wants you to learn. I mean, it doesn't
No,
matter.
but I think he or she are looking for work. They have a few years of experience, and now they're like on the job hunting.
So learn technology, learn whatever you want. I don't think that that matters. In terms of job seeking, I think again, I mean, we find a job, whatever job you can find, and move into the role that you want. That's one way of doing it. The other thing is, go to meetups, meet with people in person, talk to them, build relationships. I think that these things go far longer way than knowing DBT or Spark or AWS, because everyone can learn DBT, everyone can learn AWS. Not everyone has a relationship with the hiring manager in British Airways that is looking for a data engineer right now. Make that your edge.
Exactly. I would add that which tech stack to learn is the wrong answer. Sorry, the wrong question, as Shachar has alluded, and he has a talk about the subject, so you can check it out. Okay, next question is by Vijay Datada. And he says that now he sees a lot of budgeting towards all the agentic and MCP. Okay, and the question, how's the landscape looking like seeing such massive budgets on this project? Should we be ready for the pattern that we just saw from 2022 layoffs, or to be a great transformation economy? So I guess assuming all those agents will be implemented.
So I think there will be agents that automate and delegate work. I think that's a plausible outcome. I don't disagree with that. I think that there's a lot of money going into that. I think that if you look back, 3, 4, 5 years ago, a lot of money was going into metaverse and into cryptocurrencies, because that was the hype of the moment. And before that, a lot of money was going into cloud computing because that was the hype of the moment. I mean, look at the Gartner hype cycle.
Yeah.
Just Google it and see what it looks like. And right now, AI is a hype, and everybody's shifting the budgets towards AI. I suspect, like my thinking is that at some point expectations will become more realistic. There will still be a lot of money going into AI. AI will also get more expensive than it is right now, that's for sure. And some of the expectations around what this technology can and cannot do will become more realistic, and the technology will mature.
Cool. Last question by Igor Tarinov, which is interesting. Question says storage costs keep increasing, extracting insight from data keeps rising, and the challenge, more engineers, more tooling, more compute is being spent to debug and optimize jobs that should just work. So the question is, in your opinion, Is the industry hitting a structural ceiling where observability and performance tooling became the next major constraint after storage was effectively solved? And what does a winning category look like there? Horizontal, vertical, or AI native? So that's the question.
So I think that this observation is spot on, and people show me what they do with AI agent, crunching data, and I look at that and I look at how much it costs, and I say you could do that for a fraction of the cost, with just a Postgres database and just run a SQL query on it. You didn't need all this extra complexity and all of that. But I think that again, going back to the hype cycle, during the hype, the priority is let's show that we know how to do AI. Let's not worry too much about cost. There's another really good model by Kent Beck, the guy who invented the extreme programming, and he was one of the founding members of the Agile Manifesto, and his model 3x, which is explore, expand, extract. And he talks about the life cycle of software, and he says that in the beginning you just start exploring, and then you start expanding, and you don't care about costs, you don't care about performance, you don't care about anything. But then you hit the point where you've reached the ceiling, and then you start optimizing and you try to extract the value out of it. So I think that this model will apply here in the sense that the companies that spend so much money on AI right now, they're not even looking at costs, right? They have some budget for that. It's astonishing budget. They just throw money because they want to show that they know how to do it. But at some point, the CFO will raise their head and say, "Hey guys, like, party is over. Now we need to start being more conscious of our spending on AI. We need to start, budget our tokens. We need to be more efficient." And then performance consideration will come in. It will, people will start looking at, does this use case actually make sense or does it not make sense? They will not just think, okay, let's build a chatbot. They will also ask, what do we get in return from building this chatbot? What are we saving? And does it make sense for us to retain that? So these things will come up for sure.
Cool. And yes, if he can ask you a question, a follow-up question, so I guess he can contact you on LinkedIn or something, right?
Yeah, so I'll just say anyone feel free to add me on LinkedIn. Let's, send me questions directly. Let's if I didn't answer your question, I'm happy to try. And also I spoke about some of these things on my channel, so feel free to check it out and you
I
might.
highly recommend checking out.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And I would add to Igor, I like your question because this is one of the motivations behind DataFlint, right? We are working on performance and optimization. So I totally agree with your framing. So we are at the end. I would like to thank Shachar. I think that was super fun. And I felt like we barely touched on the future. We should have done longer, maybe in
Keep
the
it for
future.
next time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And thank you to all the attendees and listeners. I wish everyone a great day, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye bye.